So welcome to the show tonight, the one and the only Judge Brown. Hey, Judge Joe Brown, how you doing, sir?
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yes, sir. So let me ask you a couple of questions just to get us into it. And I always like to ask people, Judge Joe Brown, how do you maintain your peace? With all that's going on, how do you maintain your peace and your center in the midst of it all?
I live an active life. I stay focused and I have a purpose.
And what is
If
that purpose,
anything's
sir?
going on bad, it's adversity. But lions, tigers, and grizzly bears are adversity, and overcoming adversity is, to put it mildly, interesting.
To put it mildly, yes.
Mm,
it is it is
excitement.
it is remarkably interesting to say the least. Um, as you have come through 2020, we all have obviously, and well, those of us on this side of it, right? I'm wondering what lessons did you learn in 2020 that were significant and important for you?
History repeats, and most people don't feel like learning its lessons, so they go along la-di-da kind of blind to everything. Saw a lot of that.
Mm. Were there any particular lessons that history repeated in 2020
Yes.
that are of note tonight?
Yes, America runs in 50-year cycles. You look back to the 60s to figure out what we were doing then, look back 50 more years, and it got real nasty back then, but we don't seem to recall that. And the other thing is the best thing, do for self. Don't worry about anybody else doing it for you because they might, but only if they have an alliance or an allegiance to you or they have some duty, honor, or obligation to you. And these days, those things are kind of out the window.
Mm,
They shouldn't be, but they are.
that's interesting. What lesson do you think America is repeating today?
They forget that sometimes the worst enemy you can have is somebody who zealously believes in a cause that is supposedly for your own good, and with good conscience they would do things to you that are the same kind of things that somebody with a low down, dirty, filthy motivation might do to you. In other words, it's kind of like the ancient way of let's save his soul, so we're going to burn him at the stake.
Yeah, I actually follow that. Yeah, yes, yes, sir. You know what's interesting? You have such a remarkable presence, certainly a remarkable TV presence, and it's an honor to get to talk to you because you're such a pioneer.
That was interesting with what I actually had. There was a problem Hollywood has with black men. Most people don't know this. They say I was number two daytime judge show. What they don't put is I was number two overall syndicated show, period.
Mm,
A lot of times I was stepping on Judy's heels, and we were in the same section at a CBS. They had four under a guy named Roger King. It was me, Judy, Oprah, and Dr. Phil. And what was happening is for the last 3 or 4 years, I beat Oprah almost every week in the ratings. Phil just stomped on him. And a lot of times I beat Judy. Every time I wound up beating Judy, CBS would change the rating schedule to keep her ahead. They weren't going to have a black man as the number one TV show in America, period. No how, no way. So after 15 years, I was of retirement age. I said, F you, I'm out of here. Tired of you, didn't like any of you any damn way. So, ex-wife, we got through in a divorce after 4 years in California. That finished up 3 years ago. Hell, she got a big chunk of it, but I ain't broke. So, I'm having a good time.
Judge, I'm here for all of this. I just want you to know that.
They're even
Um,
trying to talk me into running for mayor of the city I live in right now. I might do it.
well,
Memphis,
well,
in case
listen,
you're
your
interested.
your candidacy would be colorful to say the least. But let me ask you this: how did it feel to be that successful at the time that you were?
Well, when
Um,
I got into it, I was in my 50s. So I
mhm.
had myself well grounded and I knew life had ups and downs and there were things you had to focus on. So it was nice. It was sort of, okay, do I spend all day long listening to a bunch of lawyers and resolving a lot of stuff that had to do with stuck on stupid and people getting into bad situations? Before that, I had to argue with a lot of idiots on the bench in the bat capes. Then I didn't have to do that. So I had a long career. It was interesting. I was in charge, so I used what they let me have as a pulpit to spread a word, which was man up. I started that. There was a guy named Cliff Stewart. He just died last year. My buddy. We were brothers, so to speak. We'd known each other for about 55 years. And it wound up being Dr. Stewart, and he was about probably the foremost martial arts master in the world. So we ran a playground at Trinity Avenue Elementary School in Los Angeles back in the 60s. He was the youngest playground director in the LA school system. I worked for him, and there was another guy named Ron Chappelle, now Dr. Chappelle. Everybody was into martial arts. And we did a lot of things on this playground. We had two interesting young men who were skinny little 13-year-olds at the same time. One of them's now dead. He was Barry White, the singer. The other one, he's now dead too. He was the last person executed on death row in California, Tookie Williams. He started the Crips. One, his mama let him get out, and the other one, his mama wouldn't let him get out, so we couldn't get him out of the swamp. He just became the baddest ass alligator in the swamp. And he wrote 6 children's books, and if anybody deserved a commutation of sentence, he did. So he started off as a nice kid, brilliant. He just became the baddest alligator in the swamp because the swamp wouldn't go away. But, you know, it's been an interesting life since then. And I was a DJ at the time. We set up a radio station, and we had a broadcast radius of a few miles, but we used to rock it, so it was intriguing.
But Judge Brown, one of the things I know about you is that you were a prosecutor before you became a judge.
Well, not only that, I was the public defender for Memphis. See, I did with poverty law, then I went with EEOC, then I became the first black prosecutor in Memphis ever. And then I ran the public defender's office in Memphis, and then I was in private practice specializing in first-degree murder trials. I trained the appointed panel for appointed lawyers for capital defense team work. I don't have any clients that are on death row that I've represented, but I represented 42 death penalty cases over the years, got the youngest person in the world on death row off down here in Arkansas. I had to go visit for that one. And then I got elected as a judge for 2 8-year terms. So when I got on the bench doing binding contractual arbitration in California, as per the California Supreme Court, you know, I had a life. You know, I'm into scuba, skiing, horseback riding, hunting.
But Judge Brown, I was on my way to a question, and here's my question. Talk to me a little while about racism in prosecutors' offices, because you had a unique perspective being there.
Well, yeah, black. They tried to run you around, and when I got in there, it was in the very early 70s, and I'd look up somebody's record to give them an offer, and it would have such offenses on there as, get this one, colored person refusing to remove from sidewalk for passage of white person. Reckless eyeballing of white person by colored person. And this was one, I always used to get a wicked laugh at it, acting too colored in public. And yes, there was racism in the prosecutor's office. There's a lot of it. Even when I was on the bench 30-some years later, ran into situations where, okay, me and the other several black criminal court judges had a rule. What you did in one part of the town, you did in the other. So some prosecutor, who's now the chief prosecutor, walks in and asks me to take a transfer. She hadn't been long in the office, so I took the transfer. The plea was somebody getting 1 year suspended up front, probation, 1 year probation, upfront probation, and unsupervised. So I agreed to take it, but I insisted on a hearing. She got upset about it. We went into the hearing and I stopped everything. I said, we don't know what the quantities of drugs are. So it found out it was 4 pounds of 90%, 98% pure heroin, 4.5 kilos of basically pure cocaine, 1000 doses of crystal meth. And I said, I'm going to find you in contempt. You bring in my courtroom trying to get somebody off with 1 year suspended on this, and it's 25 to life in the federal penitentiary. And in the state, that's 50 to 60 years. And you come in, and I brought in the narcs, and they had been working on the case for 4.5, 5 years and had a good solid bust. So I just set the plea aside and set the damn thing for trial, transferred it back to see what happened. See, that goes on in the prosecutor's office, and this same prosecutor is notorious right now, 25, 27 years later, for giving out the stiffest sentences or recommendations for simple possession of marijuana in the United States.
Wow. Listen, Judge, I got to take a break. But I am, you are such a fascinating presence, and your adeptness and your ability, to work your way through the narrative of your life and your thoughts. It's compelling, to say the least.
Now, when we come back, now ask me about something interesting. That's just work. See, that's work.
We'll be right back. More Judge Brown after this. Back, everybody. We're talking to the univocal, the one and only Judge Joe Brown. He is a force of nature, people, and I'm glad he's here tonight. Judge, let me ask you a question about the show, because one of the things I've always wanted to ask you is, how did your show happen? How were you, quote unquote, discovered to go on the air?
Well, they had done several years worth of stuff on 60 Minutes, Nightly News, that kind of thing. Ed Bradley's Street Story about novel sentencing and how that was working out. And then I was the last judge on the James Earl Ray Martin Luther King matter, so that got some play. And then Court TV carried, I think, 3 first-degree murder trials that were in my courtroom. So they came to me, and actually it was kind of nasty way they came at me. They wanted me to come in, and basically Judge Judy was asking for too much money in their opinion, and they wanted to threaten her with replacement by me. They let me get my foot in the door, and they tried to kill the show because the guy that ran it embezzled a lot of money, and it wouldn't go away. I hired a beautiful sister who actually was Rupert Murdoch's personal lobbyist, and we set them up. They did some filthy stuff, like a month and a half after the show started, to try and set this up. I was a bachelor. I was kicking it. They had a thing at the Beverly Hilton, big party. And I was dancing with all the ladies, and then I kind of got close to one, so we got to talking. She got up to go to the ladies' room, came back and said, "Do you know that guy?" I said, "Who?" He said, "Guy, tall guy in the gray suit." I said, "Yeah." He said he offered me $2,000 in cash if I'd signed this little note saying that you were trying to molest me. So we went around, she and I, and we found all of the women we could find, and they'd all been approached by this guy and one other person with an offer of cash.
Why were they doing that, in your opinion?
Bill Cosby. See, that was the thing. They'd get something they thought to be naive men, and they'd get them set up where they'd be compromised by inappropriate behavior with the women, and this was sort of pre-hashtag Me Too. So what we wound up doing was
Judge Brown, is it your opinion that they were trying to torpedo the show?
Well, here's what it is. Mel Brooks had a movie and a play called The Producers. In other words, if the show flopped, you could steal more money than you could make if it was hit, and that's what they were trying to do. So for the next 14 years, they were trying to conceal the embezzlement, and they wanted me to take a big IOU when the show was over. I said, "No, you can talk to my lawyers." But see, they were foul and filthy. We set them up. We invented a fictional woman, filed all of these affidavits, and human resources had them sealed. And when they wanted to complain with this letter from a woman that I supposedly did some bad things to her, it was signed. We had them bring over all these affidavits where myself and my publicist had set them up so they weren't there 6 more weeks. I was there for 14 more years. But you see, that's how foul they play. So all the time they're trying to do stuff like that with you. But I had sense enough. Got married to somebody I already knew. She was drop dead gorgeous, expensive as hell, but she was fine. So that's sort of like, look, you ain't as fine as what I got at home. Bye. You know. So one of those things.
Judge, let me ask you one more show question. Just one more, if I may. How did you feel when it came to an end, when the show was finally done? First of all, how did it come to an end, and then how did you feel about it?
Basically, it was a contract thing. What happened is I had sense enough to do something everybody in this business should do: buy some stock in the company that you work for, so you get the corporate newsletter. Now, CBS was sending out to the stockholders that for 14 consecutive quarters, their profits had increased, and the last 4 were the most profitable in CBS history. And they said, thanks in great part to the low overhead and extremely high income from the Judge Joe Brown show. So I'm reading this and I'm looking at all of these executives, 14 of them, who got these raises because of this, and they're coming to me, the ratings are dropping. I say, yeah, but the money is up and the ratings are dropping for everybody across the board because of alternative media. It's all about relevance. So what are you talking about? So after a while I said, no, I tell you what, you just pay me my money. I'm out of here. I had a deal where I was getting 40% of the unadjusted gross from the first dollar. So I just wanted them their money. I said, bye, I can retire. I can collect Social Security at that point. I said, let me get the hell out of here. Y'all lost your mind. So they wanted me to take an IOU, and I just said, bye. So that's basically what happened. It was an ongoing fight. You got to watch these people. For instance, I got approached by a bank about getting 5 mortgages reduced to 1 with a fixed rate of less than 1%, okay? So you fill out this application, and one of them says, are you now or have you in the last 5 years been subject to any lawsuits? I just says no. I get an FBI agent at my door talking about you made a false statement on a federal application. What false statement? You've been sued. Turned out I'd been sued 7 times. These idiots had intercepted the process, didn't tell me about it, and had some bozos in court trying to represent me. And on the record, when I got the transcript, trying to confess that I was doing something that the California State Supreme Court said everybody could go to jail for. So you had to watch out for stunts like this, you know, or you get calls from somebody's attorney general's office in some state wanted to know about unlawful practice. So what? So find out they put some stupid stuff on there. Ask Judge Joe Brown a question and he'll personally respond to you. You know, you had to watch your back at every step, because once you got big, especially at the end, you had these executives who were in their early mid-30s. They had then 4 of the most successful shows on TV: me, Judge Judy, Oprah Winfrey, and Dr. Phil. But they couldn't claim any credit for it. They just came in. So in Hollywood, in that level of operation, they want to say, this is what I came up with, and they couldn't do that. So they started embezzling money trying to set up other shows that all flopped. Like today, I can't stand a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movie because they got millions of dollars that they stole from me financing the distribution on those movies. So I'm saying, where's my money? So every time we'd do that, my lawyers would get on the case, they'd offer more money for the next contract. So after a while, I just said, you know what? Go cram yourself. So they fired everybody that was responsible for me not being there, and they got gone. Bye, you failed. But, you know, I'm having a nice retirement.
But Judge, let me say this. First of all, I see why your show is so successful. I totally get it, because, you know, your personality and your carriage, you're just engrossing and compelling. Let me ask you one more question. This isn't an advice question. So if there's someone who's going into being a TV judge, what's your advice to them?
Know what the hell you're doing. See, one of the problems they have with this whole genre and in the real world too, they have too many people in high school had an ambition of being a judge. But I tell people this is something you kind of get called for. You got to have experience in life. You got to have mortgages, car notes, kids you got to deal with. Show up every day because you can't afford not to. And you have to be wise and experienced in law as well as in life. So you get people. Well, actually, if I look at the judges that they've had on TV judges, with the exception of 3 or 4 of them, very few of them were out of law school for 5 years before they got into being these TV judges. Very few of them had ever tried a real case in front of a jury. Very, very few of them had ever filed an appeal or argued one in front of somebody's appellate courts. And very, very few, if none, had had a client sitting on the other side of the desk from them. And it's like they give the public the wrong idea about what the law is about. It's not confrontation. It's about resolution and also educating the public and setting or expressing rules that can guide what other people do.
That's rich. Now, that's rich, Judge. That's a rich answer. And let me add to that not only is that not what the law is about, that's not what life is about. Life is not perpetually about conflict. It's about finding ways to do exactly what you just said, to expose the rules and the principles and to find a way to work with the people, especially if you believe that you love them. But go ahead, Judge.
Let me give you a real world example.
Go ahead.
Years ago, there was a woman who sent her husband to law school. She had 3 kids, then she decided to go to law school. She graduated. She just turned 30 the week before she got sworn into the bar. 4 days after she was sworn into the bar, the state governor appointed her as a circuit court, superior court judge. So the biggest rookie in the courtroom is the judge. She had been out of law school a total of 15 months and she got appointed a federal district court judge. It got so bad that when things came up from her court on appeal to the 6th Circuit, the judges would say, "Who did this?" And then it's, "Oh, God." So it was just like, it's a travesty when the biggest amateur in the courtroom is sitting on the bench in charge.
Right.
But you see, that's the way things work now. And in fact, I'd make an observation about American courts. You have too few judges who have had any real world experience dealing with other people, real people that deal with corporations. They took constitutional law, not as it applies to a citizen, but as it applies to some corporate entity, conflict of law. It's all about making money, and they forget the fact that they live here too. They might want to be interested in what impacts them. But that aside, it's about life. So what you know about life, you can express in what you're doing. I always took the...
Just stop for a second, because that's a great segue to the next question I want to ask you. That being this, from all your decisions and all your cases and all of your experiences, what has all that taught you about life? What have you walked away knowing about life that you could not have learned any other way?
Most of the problems come from ignorance. But then there's a thing about ignorance. It can be cured by the acquisition of knowledge and information. But there is a congenital condition that some suffer from. It's not ignorance. I call it ignorance. In other words, you one ignorant fool. Boy, what's wrong with you? What happened? Do you have any sense? Answer no. Or you rode on the short bus to school, didn't you? How did you know? Like, hey, man.
Listen, Judge Brown, hold that thought. I got to take one more break. We're going to bring you back. You can finish that thought. I got some more questions for you. I want to know what you're doing now. I want to know what you're up to. I want to know what you're passionate about. I'm interested in you. And so we'll be right back. Judge Brown is here, people. He is in the building. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We're talking to Judge Joe Brown tonight, the one and only Judge Brown. Judge Brown, let me ask you this, my dear brother. You've had such an impact on television, and had such an impact on allowing Black people to see ourselves in positions of decision making. which I think is always important. It's always important for us to see ourselves doing that. And I'm wondering tonight, were there any cases that stood out for you that you will just never forget? Things that came into your courtroom and you were like, listen, I will never forget that this happened.
Yeah, but it wasn't on TV.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, there was a murder case that had hit the papers, and everybody was lusting for the blood of the defendant. The newspapers were sitting out there, the families of the victim were sitting out there, and family members of the victim. And the jury had a question, and I announced that. I got from the foreman. I asked him if this was his, polled the jury, and the press was hanging on it. You know, they were getting ready to scribble, and the family was leaning forward. There's going to be blood. The question was, ladies and gentlemen, the court will now publish the question of the jury. Your Honor, if we feel that the victim deserved killing, do we have to convict the defendant? I said, is that your question? Yes, Your Honor, it is. We thought he ought to die. At that point, the jury walked out. The other time, this one I had a problem with because I almost choked. We had this dingbat female lawyer. And she got out of law school, I don't know, and it was a rape drug case. It really wasn't a rape drug case. And the witness for one of the defendants, she represented one, was testifying well. And then she cross-examined the witness who actually had helped her. One of the jurors stood up and said, ma'am, just shut up, sit down. We don't want to know. Just sit down. I said, ma'am, you cannot coach counsel.
You cannot coach the lawyer.
It had been going on like this for the trial. So in the final period, she spread the evidence out on the floor. Where I sit is directly across from the jury box, right? Then there's counsel table that sort of blocks that in, and there's a triangle in between. So she'd spread all the evidence out on the floor between where I was and where the jury was, and she pranced around, walked up, and kind of excused herself to one of my clerks and stood up on the clerk's table. So my clerk's going, what? I said, let her go. So she says, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the state is trying to get my client to take a dive on the evidence. And at this point, she executed a perfect swan dive. And off of this, it landed on the floor. Boom. Ooh. I said, bailiff, would you check to see if counsel's all right? He said, Your Honor, she's kind of unconscious. So I'm sitting there, and I'm trying not to laugh my head off, right? And I'm saying, I'm going to be dignified. If I take a breath, I will bust out laughing. If I don't breathe, I'm going to pass out. So I get this bright idea to write recess on a yellow pad. But by then, I'm suffering from lack of oxygen, and I can't remember how to spell recess. So I said, let's take a break. I can spell that, and I held it up. The jury busted out laughing and ran out of court.
That's a great story. Did that really happen?
Yes. There's another one. I wasn't the judge. I was one of the lawyers. It was two people on trial for robbery murder that they didn't commit. And there were 14 people in the jury box, including two alternates. The judge wasn't paying a bit of attention. The prosecutor was not paying attention. The witness wasn't paying attention. Nobody at the counsel table was paying attention. And nobody in the audience was paying attention. And only one juror was paying attention. She was a rather size 4XL lady with an elastic bodice in her big bosoms. The reason nobody was paying the slightest bit of attention is because this escapee from Jurassic Park, a huge, monstrous, prehistoric water bug, was crawling on the ceiling, and it lost its grip, fell down in the woman's bodice. The only one that wasn't looking, she launched like an Apollo moon rocket with a gurgle in her voice over the barrier in front of the jury box, landed on the floor, did 2 circuits a la Three Stooges on one arm, screaming, and she fainted. All these cops ran in with drawn guns from the hallway. This monster water bug runs out, and the cops threw down on the bug, and everybody, including the judge, jumps up on their chairs. So 911 got called, paramedics got there, and they were, I mean, this woman was heavy. It took 4 cops, my man, one of the courtroom bailiffs, and the 3 paramedics to get this woman on a gurney. And the arm gets like, Judge said, I think we'll take a recess until tomorrow morning. And these fools are still standing there with drawn sidearms in case this thing returns. I mean, they didn't have cell phones then. It would have been, you know.
It would have gone viral. It would have gone viral. There's no doubt about that.
It's like, damn. See, some real shit happens in the courtroom, the real stuff, let me say that is quite amusing. But anyway, you know.
Yeah, listen, Judge, you you can come back to this show anytime you want to.
Yeah.
I enjoy talking to you. Let me ask you a couple of questions before I let you go. Here's my first one. What are you grateful for? When you look across your life with all your experiences, what are the things you're most grateful for?
A thirst for reading.
Oh, yes, you and I talked about that. When we were on the break, I mentioned to you that my mentor was Daniel Webster Joy, and I mentioned to you that all I ever saw him do was read. And then you said that's exactly what you do. Say more about that.
Yeah, I read until around 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock every morning, you know. Be dead soon enough, but that's not long enough to get all the knowledge I want to abolish this abysmal store of ignorance. It's just acquiring wisdom and then having a lifetime of experience to know what to do with the information once you get it, and you can convey it to others. So that's kind of what I do. The other thing is I like adventure. So I've had some adventures in life. Some of them I'll leave in a book, and you can read about it later after I'm gone. I don't want to create any scandal, but it's not that kind of stuff.
Well, Judge, look, I'm your brother. You can tell me. I won't tell nobody.
Well, no, it's statute of limitations has run on some of this. We'll leave it at that. But yeah, there's been some interesting things in life. Seriously, talking about racism in the courts. I represented one time this very beautiful young lady. She wasn't but 16 then, and her grandfather had left her 80,000 acres of farmland. So he had gotten sick, and they had some white farmers who were releasing all 80,000 acres for $50. So I hooked her up with a gentleman who was doing corporate farming. He's black. And he offered her 20% of the cash crop and $100,000 for the rentals, and we had to get a permanent injunction set aside. So talking about it getting exciting, they had on the other side cut down trees and put boulders in the access to some of this landlocked property. So Tom Burrell, that's his name, he writes books, and he took his bulldozers and tractors and moved this stuff out of the way. So when we get on the property, I've got the court order in my briefcase. That's the only thing there. And when the sheriff gets there, I've got a pistol in each hand, and everybody's got shotguns and rifles on each side. The sheriff's go, wait a minute, boys, wait a minute. God damn, put them guns down, lower them muzzles. We don't need no blood letting up in here. What the hell's going on? I said, Sheriff, over there in the briefcase, there's an order signed by Chancellor so-and-so. You should go look at it. Jesus Christ, Tucker, you need to get your butt over here. You trespassing on these folks' lands. If they shoot you, I ain't gonna do nothing. But put them muzzles down, just don't get frantic up in here. So, I mean, it could get real exciting. You know, people don't know about that. See, they were real back 40 years ago when you see what happened.
Listen, let me ask you a question, Judge. Would the 12-year-old you be surprised at all that you have accomplished and all that you've done?
Probably, yeah.
What would the 12-year-old think about your life?
Wow. I've had the fortune of having had some beautiful women in my life, gone some strange places in my life, had some great adventures in my life, made a lot of money in life, and I can sleep easily at night.
Hmm.
So I guess that's pretty good. I've been in the water 5 feet away, looking eyeball to eyeball with a 30-foot long orca bull that we saw going out to the Channel Islands, killed 3 dolphins. That he got up on the boat so heavy, 30,000 pounds worth, that the 60-foot long vessel canted to one side, listed. The markings are distinctive. I was down about 60 feet over one of the Channel Islands off of Ventura, and I am taking notes on a slate, and I look over and there's this bad boy like that, and I said, oh, hell. Let me be polite. I said, am I to wind up as whale poop on the
Yeah.
bottom here? But he and I got
Those
along
those
okay.
moments will make you reconsider everything. Here's my last question for you, Judge, and then we have to leave it there. And think about this question for a second, if you will. What do you long for?
Aside from a long, healthy life or more adventure, to have made a difference. It's the most important thing. Everybody dies because you're not getting out of this bad boy alive. So when you're gone, what did you do to make people remember you? Or can you say to yourself before you go, is there somebody would say that I helped them? You pointed out a gentleman that helped you, and I find it very rewarding when people come up to me and say, you helped me. So I want to leave as many of those behind as I can.
Yes, Judge. Listen, Judge Joe Brown, thank you for coming on tonight. I so appreciate your time, your wit, your humor, your wisdom, quite honestly, and your perseverance. Again, you got to come back and see me. I enjoyed talking to you. I hope you had a good time.
And by the way, one other thing, you can catch me on Twitter at Judge Joe Brown TV, but I do not have a blue check. They won't give me one.
Okay, well, we're going to have to work on that. Listen, everybody, Judge Joe Brown. We'll be right back after this. Thank you so much.